This is the Mountainside Podcast, and joining us in studio for this episode is Christian Sausser. He's a social media expert at Clandestine Media Group, professional photographer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and just a fun guy to be around. I thoroughly enjoyed recording this episode with him, and I hope you enjoy this week's podcast. Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Hell yeah. Welcome to Evergreen. Have you spent time up here before? Or?
Not a whole lot. No, I mean, I'm from Colorado, but I haven't spent as much time up in the mountain towns as I'd like. My in-laws have a cabin in Tabernash, so we'll go hit Winter
that's
Park
awesome
a little bit.
Up there. Yeah,
but we haven't been up there as much just because I have a 2-year-old now, so time is obviously a lot more limited. But I'd like to get him into snowboarding, so getting him up to Winter Park would be fun. But it's so crowded now, man. Like, it's hard to get a good time on the lift, you know what I mean? Like, the best time is to go up during the week, which is hard just because of how much I'm working. But I'd like to go up more because I really did enjoy snowboarding. I did it for a long time. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a pain in the ass, dude. I don't even go anymore. And like,
Yeah.
I don't like dealing with I-70, honestly, is the worst part of it.
Yeah.
It's like the only time that I would have time is really on the weekend. So I got a split board, so I do a little bit of backcountry, and
okay.
I enjoy that, you know, but
Yeah.
I haven't been once this year.
Yeah, I haven't
It's
either.
just, you know, when you have kids, dude, it changes the game, especially at 2 years old, because
Yeah.
it's they're kind of at that phase. It's like you can't really do much but like watch football, dude.
Yeah, I know.
And chase them.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of chasing that goes on.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And he likes watching music. That's his thing. Like, he's super into music. Like, he's got his mom's like energy levels, which is super high. And the only time I can get him to sit down and actually watch something is if I put on a live performance, like on YouTube. Like, he loves old bands right now. Like, if I put Rush on, he'll watch Rush like
Really?
all the time. Yeah, he loves, and he's into drumming. Like, I think he's gonna be a drummer, which is funny because I played drums for a long time too. But
Oh, really? I didn't know that about you.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But he loves watching like just dudes playing guitar, the keyboard, drums, and that's his thing. So that's the only time I can get him to sit down and watch something. So
that's super cool. Rush, that's a hell of a drummer right there,
I know.
too, dude.
Yeah.
That's the real deal.
Yeah, it is.
He had like a crazy kit, right? Like it was like
it's insane.
So many cymbals.
He's got like multiple set of tom-toms in front of him, behind him. I mean, I think he's got probably like over a dozen cymbals on his set. I mean, it's huge. It's
wild.
Really big.
I never saw them live, man. I've seen a lot of bands live, but
yeah,
I feel you on that, man. My kids, I guess I influenced them into music, you know.
Yeah.
Like I'd always throw on, you know, I didn't feel like watching. I guess Barney wasn't around when my kids. I don't know what the popular show was, honestly, when my kids were real little. You know, probably Paw Patrol or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, I would always try to get them to like, let's watch sports, or I would throw on like the Red Hot Chili Peppers live at Celine Castle, or like some of the shows that I actually worked on, which was kind of cool. And they got super into it.
Yeah.
My oldest daughter got into Slipknot.
Oh, really? Dude, Joey Jordison, also a very good drummer. Just a phenomenal band, too. Like, dude, super talented.
Insane.
Yeah.
Insane. And they have a bunch of like kids that remake like their videos and stuff
really?
like that. It's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like YouTubers, you know.
Yeah.
But it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah. And so, yeah, I guess that love for music and influencing your kids with music is pretty cool now.
Yeah,
So,
he loves music. That's like one of his favorite
Just keep
things
him away from like the Taylor Swifts and all that sort of stuff.
I know. Well, he's into the classic stuff. Like, he likes Rush. He likes AC/DC, of course. What's another one that we listen to a lot?
AC/DC's the shit. Dude.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. He loves like Thunder. He loves hearing Thunderstruck. He likes TNT. He likes Back in Black. You know, all the classics from them.
Hell yeah.
I've started playing Led Zeppelin for him, which he likes. I mean, he loves like rock and roll. Like, that's his thing. So so my father-in-law plays in like a rock band too. He's an older guy, but they play a lot of like classics, and
classic rock's the best, dude.
It is.
I mean,
it really is. I don't think it'll ever be as good as it was, you know, in that time frame, like the 60s to the 80s. But So he's watched him perform live a couple times, and he just like he loses it every time. It's like the best thing for him. So
that's super rad. I'll give you a list there. I'll start shooting you some concerts, man.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the ones I worked on were crazy.
No, it's
and
super
some
cool.
of
I
my
didn't know
friends, yeah, they AC/DC actually in Argentina.
Really?
Fucking incredible.
I think
show.
that's one of the YouTube videos where I'm showing him. I mean, the amount of people there is like, it's got to be
insane.
At least
it's like a soccer stadium.
People.
It's sold out, and they had this huge like train on the stage
Yeah,
with devil horns, and then over the wings they had these two hats with devil horns. And the guys were not young. I mean, this was like 2009 or something like that. Actually, Derek, see if you can pull that up. Just put in, I forget what it's like, Duck Park or there's something weird like that, like Duck Park, but just put in AC/DC Argentina in YouTube. And dude, this is one of my goals with the podcast.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like, I want to get that $100 million deal that Rogan got just so I can play music, dude. I'm so jealous that he can fucking play music during his episode. It's crazy, man. If we show like a clip like this or something on YouTube, and you probably know this from like social media and all that sort of stuff, and at YouTube especially, like they'll pull it, man.
Really?
Yeah, they will. They'll pull it down monetization wise and stuff. You actually have to mute this. Is this it? I think it is. Fast forward a little bit.
That definitely looks like, this looks like one of the videos I've shown him. Yeah, that stage isn't, this is one of the videos.
It's so badass, man. And I have a really good friend that he was like the rigger during this tour, and I got to see it. I mean, it's fucking incredible, man. That was like some of my highlights of my career, was just working as a road guy, you know.
Oh,
like all the cool shit that we got to go do and see. And I mean, you work your ass off, but having moments like this doesn't get old, man. And these people go off like,
I know. And you wouldn't think like, you're like, oh, Argentina, like how much AC/DC do they listen to? And then, I mean, there's a sold out stadium there with tons of people waiting to see the music.
It's so rad, man. Those other countries too, I think it's just so rooted with like, I don't know if it's like that tribal type mentality or just the history that they have. Like America is what, 300-400 years old?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, right? Where we actually had like people banding together to fight wars and that sort of thing. I mean, I guess we had native people prior to that, right?
Sure.
That were tribal, but like, I just feel like Europe's so much more rooted. South America, like those cultures are like, some of them go all out, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they really know how to experience life sometimes.
Yeah, they really do. And it's, traveling is definitely one of the most underrated things I think people can do. Obviously, since 2020 happened, it's a lot more difficult. But that's one thing I'd like to do later in my years. Is I'd really like to do some more traveling and just take my son, to as many places as I can. And one of my bucket list goals is to take my dad to Tokyo. He's always wanted to go to Tokyo, so I really want to take him there.
Japan is the shit.
Japan is amazing. I absolutely loved being there. It was a good time. I didn't appreciate it as much when I was stationed there, but there's things I did that I'm glad I did, and there's some other things I wish I had done when I was there that I didn't do. But I got to do a lot of things that I was super stoked about that were really fun.
Yeah, man, I was so lucky, man. I figured it out like later in my career. I wish I would have figured it out a little bit earlier, that like being inside of a bar wasn't like the best place to like go experience a city or a town. But when you're young and you're ready to rape and pillage, I'm not rape. That sounded really bad. I never raped anybody, but like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like you're going to go hard, right? In the paint. But I started scheduling it like it was some of these bands that I'd be out with, because we'd go out for like 3 to 6 months. Something like that. And at the end of the tour, we'd always end, in another country or another city. And I would just book a vacation for a week and just do it on their dime. Just like fly me out a week later and I'll get my own housing or whatever.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
It was awesome.
You're gonna be there already.
I got to see so many countries and surf so many places and just cool. Do awesome shit. So I'm super fortunate I got to do it on somebody else's dime too. Because it's so expensive, man. There's no way. The way I grew up and all that sort of stuff that I could have ever done that on my own dime.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be able to travel both from the military, and then the first time I traveled outside the United States was actually through an exchange program through my dad's company, and I went to Germany. I ended up going twice, but that was like one of the greatest times ever, both those times going to Germany. And it's funny, you're talking about like all you want to do is go party. Like in German culture, they start drinking when they're super young, right? Like, so when you're 16 years old, you can drink beer, you can go into a bar, and then at 18 is when you can order hard alcohol and go to clubs. But I mean, I'm there as a 15-year-old, you know, and I'm like, let's go to the bar. And they're like, dude, like, we've already been there and done that. You know what I mean? Like, there's more to do here than just drink beer and, you know, make a fool out of yourself. But,
right.
You know, that's all I wanted to do, you know, being a young, stupid kid. So,
yeah, no, I made that mistake. I mean, there was a couple times in Ireland, like you get up into Northern Ireland and just being a dumb young kid, like you walk into a bar and there's two different types of bars there, right? The bars are almost like libraries. You walk into them and there's just guys drinking. They're not talking to anybody. There's no TVs on. It's almost like radio silence in there. Just cool. I think because of the history between the Protestants and the Catholics there and everything that happened.
Yeah.
You know, not that long ago, dude. That was like in the 80s that they were bombing.
Yeah. The IRA.
That, I mean, it was wild. And it's just like literally a brick wall that they would throw bombs over and car bombs and
it's wild.
Fucking all kinds of crazy shit, right?
Yeah.
So even in the bars, they wouldn't let you congregate in groups of more than 3. So they had like dividers up.
Really?
And it was just a really just like, you don't go in there and make a bunch of noise. And Americans are loud in general, right?
Yeah. It's easy to spot the American when you're in a different country. Yeah.
So we walked into like the first bar. I think it was the Crown Bar or something like that. And it's like one of the oldest bars in all of Ireland.
It's cool.
And also, come to find out, it was one of the most bombed establishments because like everybody gathers at the bar to have a drink or the pub.
Yeah.
And people got fucking blown up in there, man, and died. So my dumb ass walks in the door with, you know, some Ruly roadies. We were there for quite a stint because we were rehearsing for a tour that we were putting out there. So like when you start rehearsing for a tour, you're kind of dialing it in. Mm-hmm. So you kind of work like a normal schedule, and then you have the evenings off to go do whatever typically until the artists get there. So we were there for like 3 weeks or something, man, like trying to put this tour together and ringing out all the bugs in the audio equipment, the lighting and the set and all that sort of stuff, which is super cool. I mean, you work your ass off. So when you do get a little bit of downtime, so we went out hard and heavy.
Yeah.
I walked in there and I was like, we'll take 3 car bombs, not knowing that this is the most bombed, you know, fucking bar in all of Ireland. And the guy just fucking jaw drops. Like, what did you just say?
Yeah.
You know? And they don't even know what this drink is, right?
Yeah.
Like, and in the States, what is it? It's Guinness, Irish cream, and Jameson, I think, right?
I think so.
And you drop it in like a half a pint and slam it. And they're delicious, man. It tastes like chocolate milk or something, right?
Yeah.
But I just being arrogant and young and not knowing. And this was like early 2000s, so it's even a shorter time span, right? Like I think that shit even went on into the 90s probably, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know when that kind of all fizzled out, but man, it didn't go over well, dude. And it was crazy. Like the bartender was this old man, but he was like the grandfather. He brought his like son out of the kitchen, and then the grandson was all there, and they were like, hey, we're going to teach you some etiquette. Like, this isn't the place to come in. Like, they were fucking on our ass, like, pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, man. I totally apologize. Like, I had no idea. So they gave me a little history lesson there at the bar. And they were like, if you want a drink, go to the nightclub. We're not going to serve you. And I was like, hey, man, no offense. Like, I'll have a pint and I'll shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, man. Like, I just didn't know better. But thanks for, like, you know, we smoothed it over.
Yeah, that's good. Well,
and we left them like $100 tip or something, which was offensive. But yeah, and then we ended up going to this nightclub. Holy shit, that started a whole nother thing because we got to the nightclub and it's the exact opposite of the bar. I mean, you could hear a pin drop in these places and people are just like drinking beer. You go to the nightclub, it's the exact opposite, man.
Right.
Everybody's hammered. Shit is going down. The bartender there was like, oh, you want to get fucked up, huh? Drink this absinthe. Have you ever drank that shit?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
It's like a hallucinogenic.
I've heard about it. It's got wormwood in it, I think is what it's called.
It's like some sort of fungus or something that's in it. And I don't even know what happened that night, dude. It got wild. So
That's awesome.
I think we had a knife pulled on us too at that same night. This all happened within like a 6-hour period too.
Yeah.
Because Northern Ireland's different, man.
Yeah.
It's just different, but
I've heard Ireland is awesome.
it's super rad.
Yeah.
Super rad. Yeah. Put that on the list.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure. Yeah, that's crazy, man. I guess, you and I have known each other for a few years now, which is crazy. Yeah. I haven't seen you in a little while, man. So it's
been
good
a while.
to see you.
Yeah, no, it's good to see you.
But the time that we've spent together, it's been on like a photo shoot or all kinds of people around. So I'm super stoked to have you in here. I know that you're a veteran. I know you were in the Marine Corps, but I don't know much about like your post-career or this.
Sure.
Growing up as a kid. I know you're from Colorado, but we're so busy on those shoots and it's so time sensitive, right? Yeah. Because you have models and lighting and
they're in
a pretty big place. Something
that you're familiar with.
Infested place, but
the trap house.
Dude, that place is rad.
Yeah, you gotta love the trap house.
I think we saw some raccoons and all kinds of shit.
I'm sure.
Yeah. But anyways, I guess I just want to kind of dive into, I want to know about Christian, man.
Sure.
Like, I don't think this is awesome that we get to sit down and actually do this now. So
it's super fun.
Finally putting it together.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah.
So, born in Colorado, I was born in 1990. I grew up in the Highlands Ranch area, which is, that's white suburbia to a T. I'm thankful to have two parents that worked really hard to give me and my sister, a good living. I know both of my parents grew up fairly poor. My dad came from a really big family, and again, both didn't have a whole lot growing up. So working hard and being able to give my sister and I like a really good upbringing was important. And we really did, man. Like we had moved. We were in Highlands Ranch the whole time. My sister grew up in one house that was a little farther away from where we grew up, but it was still a Highlands Ranch area, still nice. I was born, maybe 8 months after they moved out of that house. So then I grew up in the same house for my entire life, pretty much in this Highlands Ranch area, which it was an awesome place to grow up.
It's kind of unheard of nowadays.
Yeah, it is. I know. Yeah, it's crazy how how many, even then, like I remember, having friends who had divorced parents was becoming more popular, but that was just like, that was kind of a sad thing, like, oh man, your parents are divorced. Like, that's kind of sad, but no, I'm really blessed to have parents that stuck together. They still are together, and grew up in this house in this awesome neighborhood where, being outdoors was king. And like, there's all these green belts that attach to all these different houses and playgrounds. And I had a lot of friends kind of in that area. So like walking to and from different people's houses or riding bikes, skateboarding, that was the thing I did a ton when I was younger. So it was a really great place to grow up, man. I wanted to move back there, but it's so expensive now in Colorado, as I'm sure you know, that it would have been a hard swing to go back. And also all the houses we looked at, I wasn't really vibing with any of the houses that we looked at. Highlands Ranch is really hilly, so having a house where you can get a little bit of privacy is difficult. And every house that we looked at, there wasn't a single room where someone couldn't be looking like directly into your living room or,
it's
in
so
your main
crazy how
space.
cookie cutter they are, man.
Yeah,
like
they are.
There's some houses that are like literally like 10 feet apart.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason is because of the fire codes probably.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just like the show Weeds, you know what I mean? Like the song that plays at the beginning, like it's pretty much just like that. But, it's funny, when I was younger, I was almost, I don't know, not embarrassed, but like people would ask where you grew up, and I'd be like, oh, I'm from Littleton / Highlands Ranch, you know what I mean? Because they'd be like, oh, you're a little silver spoon fed kid. And, nowadays it's whatever. I'm thankful to have the upbringing I did, because I grew up with a lot of awesome people, and one of my best friends to this day I still see all the time. Him and I grew up like literally 2 minutes from each other. He lived in the cul-de-sac down from me, and I've known him since I was like 8 years old. So we pretty much grew up together, and there was all kinds of people that we would hang out with in that same area that we could just walk to everyone's house, and then, like sneaking out, you had your meetup spots where everyone would meet up. Yeah. It was a great place to grow up. Yeah, it was a good old days. Obviously Colorado's changed a ton since then. So, but we live in Littleton now, my wife and I do, which is only like 10, 15 minutes away from where I grew up. So, it still feels relatively the same. And that's kind of where my wife grew up, was in the Littleton area. So yeah, it's awesome, man. But grew up in Highlands Ranch. I went to Mountain Vista High School, which was a newer high school when I was coming about at that age for high school. There's a lot of high schools in Highlands Ranch. There's Thunder Ridge, Highlands Ranch High School.
There's a lot of people in that general area, man.
Yeah. I mean, in my class, I think there was 1,200 kids, I think, in my class. Yeah. It was a big school, but, yeah, went to Mountain Vista, and I graduated in 2009, and then that was when I went to the Marine Corps shortly after graduating high school, and then graduated boot camp in 2010, and then went.
What was kind of the catalyst for you going into the Marine Corps? Was it like, did your dad serve? Or
no, so
or anything, or?
I mean, being a young kid, I wasn't as cognizant about the family history. I do have my grandpa who passed away right when I was a little kid. I never got to meet him, unfortunately, but he was in World War II, and he has a really cool history in World War II. He's got a Silver Star for valor, and did some really cool stuff in Italy. And I wasn't as cognizant about that. I mean, going back, if I had been more cognizant, I probably wouldn't have gone into the Marine Corps. I probably would have joined the Army and tried to go into the same unit that he was in or something close, just so I could kind of have that lineage there. But the reason I joined the military was I was a dumb young kid, but I had enough sense to know that if I went straight from high school to college with the mentality I had, that I was like, there's no way I was going to succeed. I mean, I was, very much into partying and being a stupid kid. And I was like, if I go to college, I'm going to waste it. You know what I mean? There's no way I'm going to make something out of myself. And I'll give credit to the Marine Corps recruiting commercials at the time, because I saw that commercial of the dude, climbing the rock and then slaying a dragon and then being transformed into this guy with dress blues. And I was like,
damn,
okay.
That's crazy. They did get a little cartoonish there for a while.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it sold me hook, line, and sinker. You know what I mean? I didn't go to any of the other recruiting stations, different branches. Like, I saw the commercial and I was like, okay, I think I'll join the Marine Corps. Like, that'll be something hard, right? That'll probably give me some discipline. And
yeah, like the hardest.
one
of them.
It's one of them. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't akin it to obviously any of the special operations.
But as a branch in general, that's the hardest.
It was pretty tough, man. Yeah. I mean, and from being, a kid with my background, coming from a relatively sheltered background, to being thrown into something like that, where you have guys from all kinds of backgrounds, right? Like guys who grew up dirt poor, guys who came from broken homes, and guys who were, in gangs and joined the military to escape that lifestyle. It's a big culture shock being thrown into a big group of guys with just all those different backgrounds. And you figure out pretty quick of just how diverse people are. You know what I mean? That was one of the cool things about the Marine Corps. But I decided to do that.
So did you go down to Pendleton or
I did,
Oceanside?
Yeah. So the way it works with boot camp is anyone who lives on the west side of the Mississippi, you'll go to MCRD in San Diego. And then if you live east of the Mississippi, you go to, oh wow, I can't believe I can't remember the name of it right now.
It's not Lejeune, is it?
No. Oh gosh,
we can look it up too.
Wow, I know. Yeah. There's going to be some people like, how do you not know this? I don't know. Paris
a few
Island.
Years ago.
There it is. Paris Island. Yeah. So I went to San Diego, and I mean, that's definitely a great place for basic training. I mean, it's gorgeous. San Diego's beautiful. Although, when you're in recruit training, you don't leave ever. You go from, the only time you leave is when you're on a bus to go from MCRD in San Diego to Camp Pendleton, which is just a different. So MCRD is right next to San Diego. You're literally right next to the San Diego airport.
Really?
And then Camp Pendleton is right outside of San Clemente. But you go up there for about a month to do all of your field and rifle training, and then you go back for what's called the Crucible. It's the last 2 weeks of boot camp. You go back for your final event, and then you come back for graduation. But yeah, it was cool, man. I mean, California is gorgeous. You know,
Did you have any friends that enlisted with you or anything like that, or
No.
were you just like doing this on your own?
Yeah. I mean, so when you pick your recruiting station, like wherever you get recruited out of, I went to the Parker recruiting station because I don't believe there wasn't a recruiting station in like the Highlands Ranch area. There might have been one in Littleton, but I went to the recruiting station where the recruiter at my high school met up with me, or came to recruit kids, which was in Parker. And, you know, I met some kids there, who I still kind of talk to now. But I didn't they have a program called the Buddy Program where you can like join with one of your best friends and they'll try to put you in the same boot camp platoon and all that stuff. But then once you graduate boot camp, you go to your school, like whatever your MOS is going to be. You go to combat training after boot camp, and then after that, you're going to go to your MOS school. And it depends if you're a combat MOS, so like an 0311 or 0351, so like infantryman, machine gunner, mortarman. You go from boot camp to infantry training, ITB, the infantry training battalion, which is another it's a lot longer than the generic combat training that I went through as a non-combat MOS. So I went to combat training for, I think it's like 2 or 3 months. And then after that, you go to your MOS school. But I mean, if I joined with a buddy and we were both radio operators, they would try to put us in like all of the same, like boot camp platoon, combat training, all that stuff. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, but they try to keep it together. But no, I didn't join with anyone. But a funny story was I went to Dry Creek Elementary School, and there was one of these kids. I can't remember his last name. His first name was Josh, and him and I were good buddies in elementary school, and we were both like very into like Army stuff and like guns. Like I remember there was a Halloween party at Dry Creek Elementary, and like I dressed up like a GI Joe, and like he dressed up as a GI Joe, and a bunch of other kids like were all wearing like M81 and like face paint, and like while everyone was inside on the dance floor, like we went out on the playground because it was dark and we were like playing war and stuff. But anyway, I went to a different middle school than he did, so I didn't see him for 10 years, something like that. And then during boot camp, I can't remember where I was going. I was walking from one place to another, and I happened to pass this kid, and I was like, Josh? And he looked at me and he was like, what's up, dude? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like of all the times, you know what I mean? Like I just happened to see him, and he was actually, he was in a medical platoon. So if you get really sick or you get hurt, you get put in like a medical platoon in boot camp. And then once you're healed, they put you back in a different boot camp platoon so you can graduate. And he was actually in a medical platoon because he had gotten like pneumonia or something really bad. And I saw him, and he was like, this place is a mind fuck, dude. He's like, just get out of here. Like, just graduate and get out of here. He's like, I've been here for like over a year. And I'm like, oh, God.
Oh, damn.
And then I never saw him again. That was the only time that I saw him. Yeah. So I'm not sure what happened to him, but I actually should try and look him. Wish I could remember his last name. But yeah, that was pretty funny. It's funny how small the Marine Corps is, because you run into people all the time who chances are like you had the same instructor or you had the same NCO from one unit to another or something like that. It's a really small branch compared to the other branches.
Did you meet a lot of Colorado kids like being or like guys from Colorado?
I had,
whether they were older or younger? So
there was one guy who was in my boot camp platoon, Ryan Schlachter, who was from Colorado. I ended up running into him later on. Funny story, I was actually going on leave during Christmas, I think, and I happened to get on a plane to fly home, and he was on the seat next, like this. I didn't fly Southwest, so it wasn't general boarding. I think I flew United, so I had an assigned seat. And I go and sit in my seat, and there's Ryan Schlachter in the seat right next to me. And I was like, what are you doing here? So dude, we ended up just drinking on the plane the whole time going back home. But no, I didn't. I mean, I had a few kids in my platoon that were from Colorado. One of my really good buddies now, Dagan Casas, who works at Bighorn Firearms in Denver. He was actually my junior Marine when I was in my last unit in California. Like I just, you get new guys in all the time. And I was pretty close to getting out at the time, but we got these, all these new guys in. And like one of the things I asked him is where they're from. And he was like, I'm from Conifer, Colorado. And I was like, oh, okay. And we ended up, staying close. And he's one of my really good friends to this day. I see him all the time. So yeah, it was pretty funny.
Same here.
Yeah.
I went to high school with him.
You went to high school with Dagan?
Yeah. Fucking small world.
See,
Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dagan is an awesome. So do you know Mitch Arake?
I do.
Yeah. Yep.
People
So
I still see quite often.
dude, that's awesome. Yeah,
That's crazy.
Dagan is one of like the best dudes that I've ever met. He's a
And
hell
this
of a
is
guy.
somebody you served with.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was my junior Marine when I was at 1st Marines in Camp Pendleton. He just like happened to get assigned to our unit and came and it was pretty funny.
Love that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so that just goes to show you like how small of a
Small world.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So you go in, you go through boot camp, you assigned as a radio operator? Is
So that
what
was the
you
job
said?
I picked.
Okay.
Well, excuse me. That was the
Or
second
that was
job
your
I picked.
MOS.
Yeah. So
Okay.
when you enlist, you fill out this paper that has like your 3 preferred jobs. Like, what do you want to do? You know, you give them 1, 2, 3. And the first job I actually selected was artillery because that's what I thought I wanted to do. I was like, okay, like I'll be behind this big cannon, like that'll be fun. And then come to find out, I didn't get a high enough GT score on my ASVAB. So there's different sections of the ASVAB. Like there's like an English section, there's a GT section, there's a couple others. And I actually got a 97 on my GT score, which is pretty bad. Granted, I was not a very educated, I didn't pay attention in school. I passed.
Did
by
you
the
play
skin of my
sports
teeth.
or anything in school? Or
I played
like,
1 year of football, but I was so obsessed with skateboarding. Like that was all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I played football my freshman year and I actually enjoyed it. Like, I didn't dislike it. But I remember during a summer football camp that year after my freshman year, like one of the coaches came up to me and he was like, you can either be skateboarding or you can play football. He's like, you got to pick one or the other. And I was like, well, I'm not playing football.
Skate or die, bro.
Skate or die. Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't play football after that. And I didn't like really get into like fitness or anything until like the end of my junior year going into my senior year when I had finally decided that I want to join the military. Which was interesting because like all of my family are like super fit people. Like my mom was a fitness model. She was like kind of a bodybuilder fitness model. She played on this, full contact women's football team in Colorado called the Valkyries. My dad was like super in shape. My sister was like a college level soccer player. And they were all like, I grew up in a house that was like very like no sugar, no TV on certain days, like very active family. We did a bunch of hiking, like, but I rebelled at every chance I could, because it's just all I wanted to do was skateboard. And like, even at the time, they would always try to push me to like go to the gym or something. And I'm like, skaters don't work out. Like, you don't understand. Like, that's not what we do.
We got to
like,
stay agile.
Right? Yeah. But
which is kind of true. I mean, you start getting yoked and you're a skater, like it doesn't really help you.
I mean, I guess it can, from like a longevity standpoint, depending on what you do, right? So like, obviously I don't think maybe powerlifting probably doesn't make a lot of sense for someone who skateboards, but like doing yoga and a lot of like flexibility stuff.
Flexibility
I think
for sure.
Yeah. So there's a pro skater named Neen Williams, I think his name is.
I know who he is.
Yeah. So he skates for Baker and like he's kind of gone through that stage. So like
he's super rad. I'm hoping we can get him on here at some point.
Oh, that'd be sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. He seems like a super cool dude,
Yeah.
but he's kind of gone through that stage where like he first started skating for Baker and like all the dudes that skate on Baker for the most part are all like super heavy partiers. You know what I mean? Like, there's some other skaters like Dustin Dolan who like all they do is like it's drinking nonstop. You know what I mean? Like you're smoking, you're drinking all the time, you're partying, and then you're skating when you're not doing that. You know what I mean? And now I follow him on Instagram and like he's all about like making all these super organic meals at home, like doing all this fitness stuff. Like I think that's pretty cool to see. But yeah, he would be a super cool guy to have on here for sure.
Yeah. I think he's sponsored by On It still. I'm not sure.
That wouldn't surprise me if he was. I'm not sure. I know that he still skates for Baker.
On It's a sponsor of ours, so we've been talking with him for a while. But he's like, kind of that hippie, gets after it though, dude. Like his workout program is insane. Yeah. He's like super strong, dude.
Yeah,
too,
absolutely.
man. Like,
and it's cool. He like tries to motivate other guys into doing it, which is cool. You know what I mean?
It's kind of funny how those guys have taken a turn, like coming up in punk rock, I was always around skaters and a lot of X Game athletes, a ton of freestyle motocross guys. Sure. That was actually kind of how I cut my teeth into live production, was doing like Tony Hawk's Boom Boom Huck Jam and some of these other shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or tours, and did a bunch with like Monster and Red Bull. So I really got to know some of these guys. And we partied our asses off back
Yeah,
then,
I'll
but like
bet.
you start seeing them later in life, and myself included. Like I was just telling Derek before we started, I was like, dude, I haven't had a drink in like at least 6 weeks, I think now, or something like that. I was like, I feel pretty good. I was like, if you were going to crack one tonight, and then when you were like, I'll just have this, I was like, whew, pass it again. Cause I don't want to have somebody sit across from me and not like partake. Right. It's like a bonding thing.
It says, and that says a lot about how much alcohol is like ingrained in just American culture, right? Like, especially in the military, right? Like that's a thing. Like if you don't drink and you're in the military, like that's pretty odd, especially in the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps has a history of being born in a bar in 1775. So if it's pretty rare to meet someone who's in the Marine Corps and doesn't drink, like that's a huge cornerstone of being in the military. But I mean, just American culture in general, right? Like it's just drinking's just a huge part of us.
It's that double-edged sword, like there was a little bit of part of me that was disappointed tonight because I was like, maybe I'll get to have a tequila tonight.
Yeah.
But no, I'm trying to, for me, it's mainly just I'm trying to reach some fitness goals.
Yeah.
And when I fuck around.
Yeah. I know.
I just lose so much.
Yeah.
Man. It's
I know.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean,
crazy.
even us like going to SHOT Show for a week, like I didn't work out for a week. I mean, I was drinking, that's one, like it's hard to go to SHOT Show and not have a few drinks, because as soon as you're done walking the show floor, like you're going to dinner with clients, you're going to some of the parties, and it's hard not to have a drink for sure. But, again, even in that week, like when I came back and I tried to, run like 6-7 miles, I got to mile 5 and I was like, I'm good. I'm
you lose it so fast.
You do.
You lose it so fast. It's insane.
Yeah. Especially when you get older too, right? Like when you're in your, when you're in your 20s, you can mess around a little bit. Like that's one thing I learned too.
You have all those hormones and stuff. Just get you right back on track. I think.
I mean, you can go partying till like 1 a.m. and wake up at 7 and be ready for a super long ruck, and like it doesn't phase you like it does when you hit your 30s.
I've become so like just that old man in his driven ways. It's like if I drink alcohol, I'm drinking one kind, I'm sticking to it. I'm paying for the premium stuff. No more like, ladies' nights beers or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. But like some of my friends, like Rick Thorne, I don't know if you know who that is. He's kind of like the godfather of BMX.
Okay.
And has been in the scene forever. Like he's super health conscious now,
cool.
and like sober. And he's always been kind of a straight edge type dude. But
sure.
It's crazy. A lot of these old punkers and rockers and stuff like that too are still pretty, some of them hit it hard, but very few, man.
Yeah.
A lot of them are like, God, I can't perform if I don't. It's just like it catches up to you.
Yeah. And you feel so much better when you do that. Like that's been a really big thing for me in the last 6 to 8 months. Is I've tried to cut out like all seed oils from my diet.
You look great, dude. You look like you put on some weight.
I have been trying quite a bit, and that's one thing that having my son kind of brought into the forefront of my mind too. I'm
lead by example, huh?
Yeah, I want to lead by example, and I want to, I want to be as healthy as I can for as long as I can for him. You know what I mean? Like I want to be able to wrestle with him when he's a little older. You know what I mean? Like hopefully go on long hikes, do backpacking, like all kinds of stuff. And I don't want to set that example either of just like drinking all the time. And I didn't grow up like that either. There was never alcohol in my house. I don't think I saw my mom even take a sip of alcohol until I was almost in my 20s probably. I rarely did I ever see my dad drink, maybe at the birthday parties a beer or two, but we didn't grow up with that in my house. So, I mean, I kind of had my stage where I was, young and on my own, where I just, I wanted to party and stuff, but now I've kind of come full circle, and I really try to focus on my health as much as I can. So trying to work out 4 to 5 days a week, I've been running a lot too, which I really enjoy, which I hated when I was younger, but I really try to run quite a bit. And if I'm going to drink, maybe once a week, maybe twice a month at that, I don't try to drink a lot. I mean, there are times when I enjoy it, like especially if my wife and I go out to a dinner and I'm having a steak, like I'll probably, I'll have a whiskey or something like that, but I rarely ever like overindulge now. Like I have like 2, you know what I mean? And that's good for me. And that was how it was for SHOT Show. I had like one night, I think I maybe had like 2 or 3 whiskeys and I was good after that. Like
my problem is once I start, man, it's like,
it's hard.
Fucking, let's go, baby.
Yeah.
Let's fucking go, you know, but
yeah.
But yeah, no, I've been good this month, and I actually did it because a buddy of mine was like kind of having a hard time with it, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it with you, dude. Fuck
Yeah.
it. Like, no big deal.
Yeah.
So it's not like something that I have to have. I feel like some people need to have that to be social.
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
It's
Like,
drinking is a huge part of being social in our culture, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I think in the military, you mix all that. Well, I mean, I can't relate because I was never in the military. I can't speak for anybody that was, but from my perspective, roadies are kind of the same sort of like, you're kind of on a deployment, dude. Like you're on a tour bus.
Yeah.
You're working long hours. It's grueling.
Yeah.
Like everybody thinks that they're backstage, like doing lines of coke off of tits and,
Yeah.
drinking Jack Daniels and smoking
Yeah.
Marlboro Reds, but it's really not the case, dude. You cannot perform at your job. Some of these guys are, 120 feet in the air, pulling up chain or doing like, there's all kinds of different gigs that kind of come along with it. And it is dangerous, man.
Yeah.
So, and then, you work 7 days in a row or something, like that one day off that you get, you're going to go hard in the paint, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. No, it's definitely the same in the military. Like you do a field op or you do something where you haven't had a chance to like go out or do anything. And then, that payday hits and it's a Friday and everyone's like, all right, we're going out. Like we're gonna
get the brig ready, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Did you guys ever have any like crazy moments like that? Like because I've heard some like crazy stories of dudes like
I'm trying to
taking over their barracks and like all kinds of crazy shit.
So one thing, when I was stationed in Okinawa, we had typhoons all the time. And when a typhoon hits, like the base pretty much gets locked down, and they'll prohibit the PX from selling alcohol once you get to a certain point in the typhoon. So when people know it's coming, people just stock up on booze. And if you're not in like a crucial role, then you just get locked down to the barracks. So like dudes will do barracks parties, and everybody's just drinking like crazy. I didn't get to do that
in the middle of a natural disaster.
In the middle of yeah. It's not like too bad, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the worst thing I ever saw was
I guess it's not a tsunami, huh? It's
no,
a little bit different.
Yeah, just super strong winds, you know what I mean? No like flooding or anything crazy. I think I saw a power line get ripped off of a transformer one time, but that's really the extent of it. And like the cars are so small that sometimes the cars will get like pushed together. From the winds.
It's crazy, dude. Japan is not a good spot for big dudes. Like,
no,
you walk around like a rock star.
Yeah.
They all think I'm like a pro wrestler or something. Every time I go over there, I'm like, no, dude. Like,
yeah. So typhoon parties were a big thing. I didn't get to partake in that as much in the beginning because as a radio operator, like in case telephone lines or something gets disrupted, we would set up antennas at the different HQs for the different units, and then you'd have to do radio watch. So obviously you can't be drunk and on radio watch at the same time. So while everyone would be in the barracks partying, I would be just at an HQ building, like sitting next to a radio, which, it's still not that bad. Like sometimes there's a TV in the duty hut. So like one of the guys would bring a PlayStation or something. So we're just sitting there like playing Call of Duty and making sure the radio works every hour. But then when I got promoted as a corporal, then another junior guy takes over that role. So then once that happened, then I got to stay in the barracks and have some fun. So yeah, that happened a couple times when I was there. That was a pretty popular thing. And it was a lot different when I went to California. So when you get orders to something like Okinawa, like an outside of the continental United States duty station, you get 2-year orders usually, at least in the Marine Corps. Every branch is a little different, but in the Marine Corps, you get 2-year orders. So at the end of that 2 years, you can either extend and you can stay there for another like year and a half, and then you can either re-enlist or get out. And at that point, you can they'll send you to another unit, or you'll go back to the States and then you'll start your transition. When I got to the end of my 2 years, I really wanted to try and get to a unit that was going to deploy. So I did what's called a PCS, a permanent change of station. And I got orders to the 1st Marine Regiment in California, which is where I met Dagan. And the culture like between those two different bases is like night and day different, because like in Okinawa, you can go out and you can do things, but you're doing it with all the guys in your unit because, the local Japanese, most of them don't want to hang out with you. A lot of them don't like the Americans there. Some of them do, but some of them definitely don't. So you're always hanging out with the people that you work with. So the bond there is like really, really tight. Like the camaraderie is way different. But then when I went to California, like Friday hits and everyone just like disappears. You know what I mean? So if you didn't have like friends already in that unit, you're kind of on your own for what you wanted to do. So it was a lot different. But everyone usually, if you're up, so Pendleton's a big base. And if you were by where I was, which was Camp Horno, which is like the more northern part of the base, it's right outside San Clemente. That's where everybody goes and parties on the weekend, is usually San Clemente. I mean, some guys would go all the way up to LA. I'm like, I don't want to go all the way up to LA.
Why?
For this.
San Clemente is great.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it. San Clemente is awesome. The beach is beautiful. There's some amazing food in San Clemente. So we would usually just stick around San Clemente. There's a couple bars that are just like known for having Marines like all the time in that place. It's called Goodies is one of them. There's a bar in San Clem called Goodies. Like if you go there on a Friday night, like guaranteed it's going to be like 99% Marines there. Yeah. Just dudes acting dumb. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's where we spend most of our time.
So you moved to that unit so you were stationed in Japan.
Yeah.
After your MOS assignment.
Yes.
Is that your first?
Yeah, that
assignment?
was my first. That was my first
duty station.
Yeah. After radio school is not very long. I think it was like 2 or 3 months. I think, and then once you finish your MOS school, they literally they have a day where they just tell you like where you're going, and it was literally just by last name. Like they did like A through E, you're going to the East Coast. E through L, you're going to the West Coast, and then L through Z, you're going to Okinawa, Japan. So. I just found out like that. I'm like, all right, I guess we're going to Okinawa. And a lot of guys were pretty bummed because, a lot of guys wanted to deploy, you know what I mean? And there aren't really any combat unit. There are infantry units in Okinawa. But chances are if you're going to Okinawa, you're going to get attached to some kind of communications, platoon or regiment or an air control squadron. And that's what I got, attached to was a Marine air control squadron. So yeah, I did that for 2 years, but I mean, it ended up being a blessing because, I mean, one of the things I wanted to do when I joined the military is see the world. That's something, guys will talk about all the time. Like, oh, if you want to see the world, join the military. And I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, granted, there are outliers where you may just get a bad luck of the draw and you may only get stationed in California for your first 4 years and you may not get the chance to go somewhere. But when you're in Okinawa, there's all kinds of, deployments. I'll put that in air quotes because I wouldn't really consider the times I went to different countries as deployments because I mean you're not doing a whole lot really.
So you were leaving Japan and going.
So I went so while stationed in Japan, our first deployment, again in air quotes, was in the Philippines, and then after the Philippines we went to Korea for a little while, and then in between the time of so after Korea the first time we went to Thailand shortly after that for this year. It happens every year. It's called Cobra Gold. It's it's a joint training big operation that happens. Usually there's there's the Thai Air Forces involved and Thai armed forces with Americans. So we went out to Thailand for that, and then shortly before when I was coming up on my 2 years ending in Okinawa, we went to Korea for the last time. And that was the only time where it was considered more of I mean, still air quotes deployment because we didn't do a whole lot, but this was in 2011. And it was when Kim Jong-un was going to be firing one of his missiles, and the air control squadron that I was a part of had a radar unit. And that was the big thing, wherever the radar goes, that's where we go. So this radar unit got tasked with going to Korea to monitor the trajectory of this missile. So
fucking scary, man.
We got overnighted to this army base. I can't remember the name of this army base. That's right outside of Osan, and we stayed there for 2 or 3 weeks, just waiting to monitor this missile. And then the missile went in the ocean, and then we went home. But yeah. So I got to go to quite a few places in that time, which now I look back on it, I'm that was, super cool. You know what I mean? Super thankful to be able to have gone to those different places. Cause I mean, I got to see some cool stuff. Korea was super, super cool. The second time we didn't get to really do a whole lot cause we were there to monitor that missile. But the first time, which was a scheduled deployment, they give you there's times where you're like in between the field operations to where you can go visit the city or go do different things. And there was a trip where you got to go to the demilitarized zone in the border between North and South Korea. So I did that, and that was like super, super cool. Like you go right to the DMZ where like there's these 3 buildings that connect North and South Korea, and you get to like look right across at the North Korean side, and there's like North Korean soldiers with like binoculars and stuff looking at you. So we got to see all of that. There's a tunnel around there where you get to go down into a tunnel that they caught the North Koreans digging, like trying to go to the southern side. And
which is like night and day, man, as far as humanity goes.
Oh, it's
right?
crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. If I could ever like visit somewhere without having my safety jeopardized, like going to North Korea, I think would just be fascinating. Cause I mean, it's a country with a population almost the size of, California, and they're under like just the most strict control from this dictator, and their lives are just, their lives are dictated in every form and fashion. You know what I mean? So just like being able to be a fly on the wall there and see how things are done. It's
frightening, man.
Yeah.
That is frightening shit to me.
It's wild. It's super cool, man. So, like it's almost like a big, like, it's like a big like pissing contest between North and the South. So on the south side of the border, there's a town, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a really small city that is inhabited by South Koreans. And the only way you can live there is if you are a direct lineage of someone who was already there or someone who was born there. So it's like a super small town, and it's like, it's not the capital, but it's like a flagship essentially for the country to like show their presence. So the North Koreans built one on the other side of the border, and it's almost deserted. Like no one lives there, but it's just like this fake town that has all these buildings, and that has this North Korean flag that is gigantic. Like if you've ever been to Golden and you see the Spyderco factory, like they have a huge American flag there, or the American flag that's on I-70 when you're coming into Denver. It's like twice the size of that. It's huge. You can see it from hundreds of miles away. I might be exaggerating on that, hundreds of miles, but I mean, you can see it from really far away.
Those huge flags are so badass. The biggest flags I've ever seen have been in Mexico.
Really?
Yeah, like Guadalajara, dude. There's this
Interesting.
crazy like mountains, and there is this flag. I don't know how big. I swear it's like half the size of the. I don't know how the hell they made this thing or hung it or how it still flies, but it is massive.
Yeah.
Bigger than any American flag I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, this flag is gigantic, but it's just like this fake town where no one lives, and they have all these speakers hooked up around the town, and it just blares like North Korean propaganda that you can kind of hear from the other side. Yeah, yeah. And again, no one lives there, but they just built it because the South Koreans are like, we're going to build one, and it's going to be bigger, and it's going to have this propaganda blaring. Yeah. Yeah, wow. So that was super cool. Super cool.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Like I couldn't imagine living in a dictatorship world like that, man. Like it's so frightening, and I think we take a lot for granted here.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Especially when you start getting in these pissing matches on social media and all the little nitpicky shit. It's like, come on, bro.
Yeah, it's people say that they're oppressed here in the United States. I'm like, with all due respect, I don't think you quite understand the term oppression. You know what I mean? Like people in North Korea, like they don't even know the word because it's not a word that's taught to them. Like they don't know what oppression is. Yeah. But when they escape to the other side, or when they somehow get access to internet that's not controlled by North Korea,
you could get killed for that.
Oh
dude.
yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I just saw something, an article somewhere about how 2 North Koreans got like 13 to 16 years of hard labor because they got caught watching some like South Korean
TikTok
YouTube video or so. Yeah, exactly. Like TikTok or something.
Damn it, dude. It was one TikTok video.
Yeah, but like literally over a decade of hard labor. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be in a working camp for 15 years because you watched something that we didn't want you to watch. That's insane.
I think that's the biggest thing that I took away from traveling is it makes you appreciate like where you came from, where you grew up. I mean, seeing stuff like that, right, probably made you appreciate Highlands Ranch a little bit. But like at 18 or 19, it probably wasn't like the best place in the world. You probably felt like, God, dude, this place sucks. Like that. That's how I felt about this until I started going like, some of the places I've been in South America where like you're walking down the street and there's the people that are begging for money literally have like gangrene.
Yeah.
Like there's no, I mean, it's so much worse off, man.
Oh, I know. Yeah. It's unreal how some people live in other places of the world.
You know what the coolest part of that, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like I don't want to forget this. The coolest part of that is when you run into a culture that is just incredibly happy, that has absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing, man. It's crazy how happy those people can be.
I know. Yeah, it really makes you think about all the things that, again, like you said, that we have here in the United States and we take for granted, you know what I mean? Like clean water, having a bathroom, you know what I mean? Like you go to other countries and there's literally a hole in the ground with a little ladle of water, and like that's what you use, you know what I mean?
Or just having clean water, man. That's huge, man.
Yeah.
Or a bathroom to use is pretty important too, man.
Yeah.
It's I don't know, man. I think everybody should, or I think kids in general, I think that there should be more immersion into some of these cultures where you actually go and, like, I guess there kind of is in a lot of religions will do like retreats, right?
Sure.
Religious retreats and stuff in Africa and all those sort of places. And I was fortunate I got to see it at kind of a young age and do it. I kind of sought it out, and honestly, like photography was kind of what drove me into that. Like I love taking pictures, and taking pictures abroad was so cool. And it was like I always wanted to find the grittiest stuff to go photograph, right? Like that was always like kind of the driving force behind it. So I'm sorry, back to your background. So you transferred back to California. So you could deploy
with hopes of deploying.
And this is kind of the height of shit going down in Afghanistan. So there's still stuff going on in Iraq. Like,
a little bit. I mean, not a lot of, there were still people deploying to Iraq a little bit at that time, but a lot more people were going to Afghanistan. Unfortunately, when I got to this unit, they had just finished a year deployment in Afghanistan, so they weren't going to go back anytime soon. So I tried to get reassigned to what's called the line company. So you have where I got orders to is called the regiment, which is like the big part of like the infantry battalion. The regiment's like the biggest unit. The line companies, which are the smaller battalions of the infantry regiment, those are the ones that tend to deploy more. But because I was a fairly decent radio operator and like one of the few guys who actually gave a shit at that unit, they didn't want to let me go anywhere. They're like, no, you're going to stay here. You're going to do this. So, for a long time when I got out of the military, it definitely I felt, I don't know, you feel like you haven't quite done what you're supposed to. I was not embarrassed, but kind of resentful.
You gotta check that box, right?
Yeah. And in the Marine Corps, especially, like deploying to a combat zone is like, it's a rite of passage. Like if you haven't done that, then you're considered inferior sometimes in the eyes of other people, which, nowadays, like, it doesn't bother me at all.
It's all kind of bullshit. I mean, it's not bullshit, man. I think it's still, I think that's what people need to remember, because it's so glamorized with, especially, this in the line of work that you're in, all the operators that you're around, and that's so glamorized nowadays, right? Which is, it's cool in its own rite of passage and stuff like that. But like, there's a ton of men. That's 1% of the men and women that serve in the military that are so integral and so many different things. And I think I've met a ton of guys just because we've had a lot of those operators on the podcast and stuff like that before. Yeah. And when I meet some of these people that are fans of the podcast, they almost like start apologizing to me right away, or telling me like, I didn't do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like that. Yeah, none of that matters, man. You're like, you're still doing a lot more than what the average American does by just enlisting. Yeah. So like, my hat goes off to anybody, whether they were a tier 1 operator or a line cook. Yeah. Yeah. Just like you said, a lot of people get caught up in that. And what some people tend to forget is, it's a team action, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody has to be involved at some scale. Like if there aren't supply guys, putting all these, different pieces of equipment and stuff on the plane, if there's not guys there rigging the equipment, if there's not guys there to fly the plane, if there's not guys there
working at the radar, doing air traffic control, like it's obviously much more difficult to sustain that mission. But, none of that is really, that's not the sexy job, right? That's not what's like considered, the actual job. So a lot of guys.
I guess what I was getting at is those people shouldn't feel inferior.
No,
like
no,
that
not at all. No, but it's tough. You know what I mean? Like, especially, when you, again, like you think of the things that you signed up for and you're like, this is kind of what I signed up for, and again, like being a young guy, and I obviously I didn't experience it, so I can't speak from firsthand experience, but, being a young guy, you're like, well, I want to go to war and I want to serve my country. You know what I mean? Like that's what I signed up for. But, that was just something that I definitely kind of struggled with when I first got out. That was just kind of the way it was. But I mean, now like I'm super stoked that I was able to go to the places I was able to go to and, meet the people I did and have the friends that I have now. And, now it's super easy because I look at my son and I'm like, if things hadn't happened the way they did, I never would have met my wife. I never would have had my kids. So
yeah, it's kind of crazy how life figures itself out sometimes.
It really does.
Figures it out for you or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. Everything happens for a reason. I'm definitely a firm believer in that. So yeah, it doesn't bother me anymore. I'm thankful that I was able to at least, again, because there's guys like Dagan, my buddy Dagan, he got orders to that regiment that I went to, and he spent his entire enlistment in one place in California, like didn't get to go to anywhere outside the continental United States, and, just did 4 years in California.
That's gotta be hard.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends on the unit too. That's another thing I learned the hard way was, I thought getting out of Okinawa and going back to the continental United States would be like the greatest thing ever because one, I'd be able to have a car again. I mean, you can have a car if you're in Okinawa, it's a little more difficult, but I'm like, I just want to be around Americans and, I want to be able to, travel outside of my base and like go places and, just be around the American culture again. But as soon as I got there and got to that unit, I was like, oh man, like I might have made a mistake here. It's just like that unit in particular. I mean, I'm not trying to speak ill of the 1st Marine Regiment because it has a ton of history, which is cool. Like if you've watched the Pacific, like the show in the Pacific, that the unit that did a lot of those awesome things in like Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands, like that was all the 1st Marine Regiment. So it has a super rich history. And one of the most famous Marine Corps officers, Chesty Puller, was a part of that unit. So, I mean, it's really rich in its history. But this unit in particular, like the leadership and like just the overall mentality of guys there was pretty bad. I mean, at that point when I was there, it was like cool to be disgruntled. Like it was cool to like be kind of a shitbag and not really care about your job. And unfortunately, that kind of worked its way on me a little bit, and just the way like people were treated at that unit. Like, I left Okinawa like a super motivated dude, like looking to hopefully do some cool things. And I mean, I wasn't even dead set on getting out after 4 years when I got to that unit. I was definitely entertaining the possibility of re-enlisting and doing some other stuff, because one of the things I really wanted to do when I joined the Marine Corps was do embassy security out of all things. Like I saw
really?
The guys like doing embassy security, and I'm like, that would be sick, because you can go anywhere in the world where there's a U.S. embassy. I mean, and I had buddies who did it, but it's not a primary MOS, so you can't like enlist and be an MSG, embassy security guard. You have to, you get your whatever your current MOS is, and then when you've spent enough time in the fleet, which is just like a unit, once you spend enough time there, you can submit a packet to go to the embassy training school, and you do training there, and if you pass, then you can then becomes like your primary job is embassy security. So but I got to that unit and just like immediately realized that this place was like really toxic, and again, a lot of the guys there like just did not give a shit about anything. Like I mean, it's funny because when guys hear that you're at an air wing, they assume that like, oh, you had it super easy, like things were super lackadaisical, and they were and they weren't at the unit I was at. Like, when we went to the field, air quotations, or like did stuff in Thailand or the Philippines, like the primary job was getting radios up and getting communications going. But once those were up, like you're doing shifts, you're doing like 12 on, 24 off, or 24 on, 24 off, whatever it is. And when you're on shift, it's pretty lackadaisical. Like if everything's working, like guys are playing spades, guys are watching movies, like it's pretty relaxed. But at the same time, we also there were some really strict parts about that unit. So like when we were back, not on a field op or anything, like every Monday was like a cami inspection where you're like in formation and your uniform is inspected, your haircut's inspected, like you have to make sure that you look presentable, all this stuff. And that did not exist when I went to this other unit. And like, there were NCOs like telling staff NCOs to fuck off, and like dudes like just not even showing up for formation, which was like unheard of to me. Like I was like, what is going on here? Like, how do they even? And it was just like kind of
crazy.
Oh, it was shocking to me because again, like when one of my staff NCOs found out I was going to this infantry regiment, he's like, you better get ready. Like it's going to be totally different than what you're used to. And I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go. And I got there and like, I go to my first morning formation and they're calling guys off and they're like, does anybody know where Corporal so-and-so is? And everyone's like, nope. And they're like, oh, okay. Like that would have never have happened at the air control squadron I was at. Like if you didn't show up to morning formation, like you were going to get smoked. Like no questions asked. You were going to get smoked.
So how do they get away with it? Like
you just had it just boils down to like different leaders just not caring, like just not giving a shit. And that's unfortunate. That's kind of the reality. Unfortunately, it's that, and it's kind of spineless leadership. Like, I don't know, like I think of my first staff NCO at my air control squadron. His name was Staff Sergeant Herna. And this dude was like 6'3", 6'4", big dude, like super intimidating, like did not talk very often. Like I rarely ever smiled, like was definitely not a guy you would fuck with. And then, I get to this other unit and this other staff sergeant is just like super lackadaisical. And like, again, like, guys that are 3-4 ranks under him are like, fuck off, dude, like whatever. Like I watched one guy like literally put him in like a headlock and like give him a noogie in front of other guys, and I was like mind blown. I'm like, did this just like happen? Because if I try to imagine myself trying to put Staff Sergeant Herna in a headlock
like
and like
middle
giving him a
school
noogie,
shit, dude.
You would get murdered. Like you would never survive something like that. So it was it was totally different. So unfortunately, like that kind of just started working its way into me. And again, the way they treated guys, like, I don't know. And by the time I got on this last field operation and guys were just not being treated super well, I just kind of made up my mind. I'm like, all right, like I'm over this. Like I'm not going to stick around for another enlistment in the hopes of deploying. Like it's just not worth it to be at this unit anymore. So I just made the decision that I was going to get out and give college a try and then see what happened. So that was kind of the deciding factor for me for getting out. But again, I'm not gonna make excuses. Like, there's plenty of guys who have been to shitty units and have stuck it out and been like, like this is just the way it is. Like I'm at a shitty unit. There's always going to be another unit I can go to. But at that point, I was like, I don't know. I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm just tired of being treated like shit and being around a bunch of guys that don't care. So I ended up just getting out and coming back.
Yeah, it's hard to be around people that don't care about what they do.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the hardest things, especially if you're in that sort of environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the Marine Corps, like it's known for high standards. That's one thing that also definitely shocked me. Like when I got to my first unit, like there were guys who were ranks above me that would like fall out of runs, you know what I mean? Or like not meet the physical qualifications on a PT test. And I'm like, well, how did you get allowed? How are you promoted 2 ranks, 3 ranks higher than I am? Like, and you can't even run 3 miles in 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like there's things you don't realize until you're already in, you know what I mean? So,
right.
But it wasn't nearly as bad until I got to that second unit where I just realized like, wow, people get away with a lot in this place. Like things again that I never would have expected anybody to get away with ever. And, not that, there were definitely things going on at this air control squadron that would not be accepted, in any terms. But for the most part, like people pretty much cared. They did care about their jobs and took it seriously. And like, maybe that's also because you're in Okinawa. Again, like when you're on Okinawa, there are things to do, but a lot of guys, they work out, they go party on the weekend, and during the weekdays, like they're probably in their barracks room playing video games. You know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of things to do outside of that, depending on where you're at. So when you're going, when you're in California, you can, the second
so many
work's
distractions,
done. Yeah,
dude.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go to Huntington, or I'm going to go do this or do that. So it's a lot different, but yeah.
Well, I guess we're burning through the time here a little bit, but I want to dive into, you just brought up a great point about caring about what you do, and what you do for a living now
Yeah.
is so fucking cool. And that whole Clandestine Media is fucking an amazing company that does amazing things. And the time that I've been able to work with you, you guys all care so much, man.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And I guess I want to kind of dive in. What was that right out of the Marine Corps that you fell into that, or
No.
did you know Luke prior, like, because you guys kind of grew up in the same area? Right?
No, I didn't know Luke until I applied to the job at RE Factor. So once I'd got out, I went to college for a little bit. Didn't quite enjoy it as much as I thought I would. And granted, there was a lot of things that I was doing to myself that weren't making it any easier. Like, I was transitioning out of the military. There's bars on campus at UCD. Like, I was definitely doing way more drinking and not studying, you know what I mean? And I thought I wanted to be a history teacher, and I ended up like not doing that at all. Like, and I didn't take college seriously. And that's the thing that I realized too, is that you think you have life figured out, you know, maybe in your younger 20s, and then you figure out pretty quick that you actually still haven't figured it out really at all. Like, you know, I got out of the Marine Corps and I'm like, college will be a breeze, like no problem. And then I get out and I'm like, I have no fucking idea what I want to do. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, I really like history, and like being a teacher would be cool. So, you know, that's what I'm going to do. So I tried to do that for a little bit, and ended up getting out of college. And then I just worked in different gun shops because I had always been into guns as a little kid. And I worked at a couple different gun shops in Colorado, and then I ended up taking a break from that to work at this compounding facility of all places, because unfortunately in the gun industry, especially working in a gun shop, it's hard to make a decent wage, you know, make a decent living, especially in Colorado with how expensive things are. You know, not to say it can't be done. You know, if you do your time and you're in a certain role, like as, you know, you're running a range or you're like a general manager at a gun shop, like you can make a decent living, but just being the guy behind the gun counter, not a whole lot of money to be made there. So then for a brief time, I tried something completely different, which was I ended up working at this company called Colorado Quality Products, which was a personal products manufacturer. So like shampoos, lotions, anti-age creams, like all this stuff. And I just went to do that because I knew I could work my way up and make a decent living. So I started there.
I'm sure glad you're not doing that anymore, huh?
Dude, that was honestly, that job taught me a lot. I learned a lot of valuable life lessons at that job. One was who you work with is just as important as the work you're doing. I mean, this place would go through people like crazy.
That's a great point.
Oh yeah, I mean, this place would go through employees like crazy. I mean, they hired people from temp agencies, like all kinds of stuff. And so I started there. And when I got to this job, you don't start right off the bat like making batches. Like that's reserved for the guys who are compounders, which the compounders make a pretty decent wage. But you start as what's called a transfer tech. So essentially, I was in charge of transferring all these products out of these big industrial tanks. You know, everything from like, I can't remember the size of some of these tanks. I mean, thousands of gallons of products in some of these big tanks, and then smaller ones. But essentially, you hook up this air pump to the tank, and then you get a hose, and like you're transferring the product into these big totes, and then you're moving all the totes to the scale, weighing it, making sure that the weight matches what the yield is supposed to be. If you get a certain percentage, you're good, and then you move all of those totes into the shipping area. So that's where I started, was just transferring all this product and then getting in and cleaning the tanks, which was pretty physically exhausting. I'm not gonna lie. It was definitely one of the most it was probably one of, if not the most physically demanding jobs that I've ever had. And it was super hot in there. Like, I mean, you're cleaning the room already where these tanks was pretty warm. And then you're cleaning these tanks out with like super hot water. So I'm like inside of this, 10,000 gallon tank, like cleaning this thing out with, I can't remember the chemical we used to clean it. But you're like super hot water, and like I'm just like, I would be drenched in my clothes, halfway through the day. So I ended up bringing a second pair of clothes so I could change out of my super sweaty wet clothes and wear new ones. So I did that, and eventually I got promoted to a compounder. So then I got to learn how to like actually make batches. So I'm like, putting all the different ingredients in there, and which was still pretty labor intensive because, like, again, if you're making like a 5,000 gallon pound batch of shampoo, the first thing you have to do is put all of this wax in this tank, and the wax is in like 50-pound bags. And the top of this tank is like, 20 flights of stairs up. So you wheel this big stairwell, or this big, like stairs on wheels. I can't remember the name for it. You're moving that over to the entrance of the tank, and then you're taking each bag up to the top, cutting it open, and pouring it in this like boiling hot water. And you're melting all this wax, and then you're putting all the other chemicals in there. And then eventually, someone else goes and transfers it and then does the cleaning portion, which that's the worst part. Like getting in the tanks, cleaning it, and transferring it, that sucks. But compounding was still pretty difficult because, again, like it's not like I have a forklift or anything. So I'm just like taking if you have a 5,000 pound batch, at least 300 pounds of that is wax. So, how many trips, I don't know how many trips that would be of going up and down these stairs with this big ass bag of wax and like pouring it into this tank that's got steam blowing in your face. So, I got it to the compounder and I was making pretty decent money. But even then I realized like this is not worth the amount of money I'm making, because I always told myself, before I got out of the gun business, I was like, at this point, I don't care what I do. If I make a decent amount of money, like I'll just suck it up and I'll do it because it'll be worth the money. And then when I got to that point, when I was making decent money, I was like, this job is not worth the amount of money that I'm making. You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't. And again,
I think a ton of people get stuck in that.
Oh yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. It's,
especially once you get ingrained in the financial system, if you got a mortgage and a car payment.
Oh yeah.
And like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I figured out pretty quickly that the money was not worth it. And so I was following Feral Concepts and RE Factor Tactical on Instagram, which at the time, Luke Peelgrain was owner of RE Factor Tactical, and they put out an Instagram post on their story saying, hey, Feral Concepts and RE Factor is hiring a shipping manager. And I was like, okay, well, like this could be a way to like kind of get back in the industry, doing something a little different than working behind the gun counter. Like this could be cool. So I ended up applying, and then Luke like texted me and he was like, hey bro, like, are you available to come in for an interview? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I walked into the CMG headquarters, which at the time was in Inglewood. I walked in there, met Luke, and then started as the shipping manager for RE Factor Tactical and Feral Concepts after that. So I did that for a little over a year, I think, like year and a half. And at the time, I had always kind of been into photography, not as into it as I am now. But I was following different guys on Instagram. One of the guys who actually worked for RE Factor, and he actually does all of the media now for GBRS Group. His name's Ryan Youngdell. And I remember stumbling across his Instagram, and I was like, dude, like this is sick. Like I would love to learn how to like take photos like that. So while I was doing the shipping at RE Factor, Luke put out this internship for a photographer. Like, hey, like if you want to come learn how to do photography, you can do this internship where we'll teach you all the basics of photography. You can come on a photo shoot, and if you live up to the expectations, there's an opportunity to be hired at Clandestine Media Group. Because at this time, Clandestine Media Group was getting bigger and bigger. Like when I had first got there, it was only Luke and two other photographers. And then the more I started working there, the more photo shoots they started booking. So there was more opportunities. So I went into Luke's office and I was like, hey man, like, can I still do the shipping, but then also do this internship? Because I'd really like to learn how to do photography. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So I would, sometimes I would come in a little earlier than I needed to, just to make sure I got all of the orders out. And then I would spend the rest of the day learning photography. So then I did that for a little while. And then eventually I started like going on photo shoots, because towards the end of that time, Feral Concepts got their own building in Montana. So we weren't going to be doing the shipping and fulfillment for both companies, just one. So I didn't need to be doing shipping as much at that time. So then I ended up doing a lot more photography at CMG. And that was just awesome. I mean, like being around, like Luke is a super talented photographer. So, and I mean, if there's one thing I've learned too, it's that, if you really want to learn something, being able to work with people who are really good at their craft is a great way to learn how to do things.
It's the best way, man. Like you can cut so many corners.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, instead of like learning from like a online tutorial or something like that, like having someone who's been there, done that, and be like, look, man, like these are the things you actually need to focus on. Like, don't worry about this so much. Like, this is how you do this. So thankfully I got to work around some really talented photographers at Clandestine Media Group and learn a lot. Luke was one of them. Another guy that we use quite a lot for our photo shoots, Matt Lingo. Definitely,
Matt.
Definitely, like Matt Lingo
Such a good human.
I know he's a phenomenal guy and is just a incredibly talented photographer. And it was super cool because I love flash photography. Like that's one thing I've really got into. Like I love just cool studio photography, and Matt is like a wizard at studio photography. So being able to learn from him a little bit when he would come out and do studio shoots for CMG and different clients. Progressed into me just doing photography for the company for a while. And then when my wife got pregnant was kind of the same time that this whole social media thing started spinning up, because companies were coming to Clandestine and not only asking for photo shoots, but we're also asking like, hey, like, do you have experience managing social media accounts? Like, is this something that we could utilize you guys for? And that was when the social media team was kind of born right there. So I transitioned from doing photography to the social media side. And I started as a social media assistant for a while, for 2 years, I think, something like that. And then about a year and a half ago, I ended up taking the position as the head of social media. So now I have 2 guys who work with me, and all we do now is just help manage social media accounts for a wide array of clients. A lot of them are kind of in the gun industry or the military industry. And there's a couple outliers there. Like there's some people who aren't exactly, they don't provide a product that is specifically tailored to the military, but their audience is generally geared towards the military. So that's what I do now, which has been awesome. I mean, it's a super cool gig. And again, I'm really thankful for the position I have now, because, you know, being family oriented is definitely one of my priorities now, being a dad. And you know, doing this job allows me to work from home, gives me a flexible schedule to where I can take my son to daycare every morning. You know, I get to see him throughout the day. You know, I'm super thankful that I don't have to be one of those people that drops their kid off at daycare at 9 a.m, works till 6 p.m, you know, sees their kid for maybe an hour.
There's so many people that do that.
I know,
too, man.
it's crazy.
There's so many people that are letting other people basically raise their kids, man.
Yeah.
And like, you don't know, like
No.
you drop them off at school, you don't know who
Yeah.
they're really spending time with or what kind of values.
Yeah.
That's why I commend anybody that can afford to do it or spends the time to do it, even if you can't afford to do it, to like homeschool your kids.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No,
man.
not at
Like,
all. And that was
as long
like
as
a
you're
faux pas.
teaching them good
Yeah.
habits and good things, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. And that was kind of a faux pas when I was growing up. Like homeschool kids, like that was
They were the weird kids,
They
right?
were. Yeah.
Like
that was
super
a weird thing.
religious or
Yeah.
whatever it was. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah. But nowadays it's becoming more and more common. I mean, and
Yeah.
as a parent now, I definitely understand it. I mean, that's something my wife and I talk about a lot, is like, you know, do we want to explore this? Because now there's different communities where if you want to homeschool your kid, like there's a word for it. I can't remember, but it's essentially a word for like groups of parents who want to homeschool their kids, and they all collectively, you know, meet up at someone's house or something, and they all learn together as a smaller group, whereas you're not just teaching your kids one-on-one, you know what I mean? So if you have the ability to have like a community of people that you trust, you know, with your kids, that could be really cool too. But
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So diving back into Clandestine and your role there now. So you're not on photo shoots that much anymore. Like
Not as much. I still help quite a bit.
That's
because
awesome.
like one of the reasons that I was able to kind of maintain a position at CMG was because I'd spent so much time at gun shops and nerding out over like different gun setups, and like I knew all the gear. That was where I really started helping out, was like setting up the gear for photo shoots. Like, you know, if we have, you know, obviously we have to set up all these different rifles for photo shoots. So I'm the one making sure that like the rifle looks correct, right? So like if the optic's at a certain height, or like, you know, if it needs to have, I'm like, well, this 14.5 is like a general purpose rifle, so we should put like a 1:6 LPVO on it with a canted red dot and a bipod. Like that's what guys are running. Like we should do that. Or, you know, we should have this kind of stock, or we should have this kind of furniture, like just stuff like that, like being able to set up the kit.
which is super important to what you guys do there, because like a lot of the models are former operators.
Yeah.
Like the kits, I mean, this is why CMG has stood out, right? I mean, really, and paved its way in that industry.
Yeah, authenticity is huge for us, and that's really important. And I mean, it is super important.
It should be for everybody, dude.
Yeah, it should.
That's a great standard and a great model to live by, honestly, whether you're doing it personally or at work.
Yeah, and it stands out a lot in the gun industry, right? Like if you look at a photo of like someone shooting a gun, and like if they're shooting a handgun and they're like teacupping the grip, you know what I mean? Like they're not even gripping the pistol the right way. Like immediately people are going to be turned off by that photo because they're
especially
like, this guy
in
doesn't
that
even hold the gun
right?
Yeah,
it's all technique and
yeah. So I mean that right there, people will rip a photo to shreds. You know what I mean? Or if like God forbid an optic gets mounted backwards or like just something like that, like just the little things, like they're super important in these kind of photo shoots because I mean, if you spend thousands of dollars on a big photo shoot and you realize at the end of the photo shoot when you're editing photos that this optic or something was mounted incorrectly, like that, all of those photos you took for those days are going to be, essentially wasted because someone didn't take the time to just look it over and make sure everything was set up correctly. So that was another role that I fit in at CMG. And that's what I'll still do now, is when we have like a big photo shoot coming up and the content team needs help like putting together the guns and like getting the kit together, like I'll go out to Montana and help set up everything for the photo shoot. And I'll just like I'll give my pointers when I can, because again, like while some of the models definitely have experience, the industry, especially in the gun industry, things change really quickly, right? Like the way you grip a rifle or the way you do this 5 years ago, 6 years ago may even be irrelevant by now. You know what I mean? I'm like, so, this is how you should hold it, or, do this kind of stance, or like do this. So that way it looks more authentic and it, looks real to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Super important about what you guys do. And I mean, the photos and the media that you guys do generate out of there stands out. It's so badass. Well, it's super cool. And I love the attention to detail.
Yeah.
Having a photography background and being fascinated with this sort of stuff and the equipment and is super cool. I think it's an art form in itself, man, just being in that niche.
It is
sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, this industry is competitive too, because there's a lot of guys nowadays who, this is what they do. They take photos in the gun industry. So if you want to stand out, you have to be super creative to think of different ways. Like, well, how do we capture this gun differently than other people have done it? Or how do we make this video so it can be trending and, be something that other people are going to want to recreate. So we have that virability, you know what I mean? So, that's a huge part of what we do. And I have to give kudos to the content team we have now, because super talented people. Just like we're talking about, they really care. They want to excel. They want to provide a really great product to the clients, and they care about their craft. You know what I mean? So when you have this smaller group of people who all really care about providing a great final product, I mean, the amount of different things that come out of it is awesome. And it's super cool to be a part of a company that has that drive and that determination to make something cool and unique.
Yeah, you guys are a bit more of a team or a family than it is like work almost type of mentality.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, there is a fine line there because, obviously it's still a business, right? Like, things have to get done. But Luke is a phenomenal guy, like just a great leader, and has provided a lot, you know what I mean, and has done a lot for the people at CMG. So I'm just, when you have obviously your leadership, just like we were talking about earlier, like going back to the Marine Corps, like your leadership is everything. And if your leader is pushing you to be better and is pushing you to do these different things, like it translates, into the finished product. So I think it's super cool to be a part of. I'm just super blessed to have this opportunity and the job where I'm at right now. It's awesome. I couldn't ask for a better team.
So looking at some of these photos, like some of the cool stuff that you guys have gotten to do, like go get embedded with the U.S. Marshals or rent a Black Hawk for a shoot.
Yeah.
Have guys fast rope out of this MH60s on a shoot or something, right? Like, it's so cool. Like, what's the craziest thing that you've seen or been able to be a part of that?
So the first photo shoot, one of the first ones we did with a helicopter in San Diego was pretty wild. That was actually my first time riding in a Black Hawk, which was unreal. I mean, it was surreal. You know what I mean? Like just having this Black Hawk come down and like dust off and like taking photos of guys fast roping out of it. I mean, it was just super cool. That, and then so we're starting to do content now at the Dillon Aero compound, which is where some of this like recent content with like the miniguns and stuff is coming out of. And that place is like, it's like Candyland for guys like me, you know what I mean? Because there's literally like miniguns on, you know, Defenders. There's miniguns on a Hilux. There's miniguns on helicopters. Yeah, and they have this huge property where, you know, they're flying the helicopter over this range and then like shooting the minigun out in different targets, and it's super cool. So like just being able to see that, because I never saw a minigun go live in the military. You know what I mean? The Marine Corps doesn't have miniguns.
Are they shooting tracer rounds out of it too?
Yeah. There's tracers.
So badass.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Wow.
So just, I mean, being able to be a part of that is just is super cool. I'm super thankful to be able to do that kind of stuff. It's something I never would have thought that I would have been able to do. And again, it kind of goes back to my whole,
that's the stuff that you think you would have done in the Marines,
right?
As opposed to like
on
a photo shoot, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It just ties back into like just everything happens for a reason. You know what I mean? Like, again, like if I hadn't gotten out of the military, I probably never would have met any of these people that I got to meet and work with and learn from. I never would have been able to have the opportunities I have now. So, I mean, I'm just super thankful for the way things have turned out. You know what I mean? I couldn't be more happy with what I'm doing. It's a good gig.
No, that's awesome. So I guess my next question is, with your role that you have now and dealing with so much social media, what are some of the kind of like, for somebody that's just getting into this, us included, like I've learned so much just through the podcast and my recent help with Matt O'Connor helping me out, you know, with the editing, shout out, and just like YouTube algorithms and like all this different stuff. Like, it is just like a never ending cycle of learning and trending and all this sort of stuff. So is that something that you guys, how do you keep your hand like kind of on the pulse of that? Like, are there any hacks or like?
Well, I mean, so the one thing, I mean, you kind of hit it, is like being aware of trends, right? Like the only way you're going to be aware of trends is being on social media, which, you know, it's a blessing and a curse. You know, I know you and Jeremiah kind of touched on this, like social media, it's a blessing and a curse, right? And it's like so many other things in life. You get out of it what you put into it, right? Like if you only follow the super negative pages and like you're getting fed negative content, then you're going to have a more negative outlook on life. But if you follow more inspirational and positive accounts, then, you know, it can be very different. But being on there and just looking at kind of what's trending, like, is this intro trending? Is this audio trending? Like, what is trending? And then how can we take that and make it our own for CMG, right? Like, how can we make something funny or make something like super cool that makes it trending, but also just gives it our own kind of flavor? Like that's one thing we're constantly looking at. And then, I mean, from like a hack standpoint, I would say, you know, getting to know your audience is one of the most important things for social media. You know what I mean? A lot of people, you know, they look at other pages and they maybe try to replicate what other pages are doing, and they're not giving their audience what they need. So, I mean, actually being in tune with your audience and knowing why they follow your page, like what kind of content they want to see, and then being able to deliver that content in your own form or fashion is huge, right? And yet, like a lot of companies, you know, they constantly want to push product, right? Because they're trying to sell stuff. And the tricky part is, how do you make something trending or make something interesting or inspire somebody or make someone laugh, but also kind of underlaying a product or a service to them? You know what I mean? And that kind of boils down into like the marketing funnel, right? Like you have your top of funnel brand awareness. So like you got to have something like viral or something that catches someone's eye, or something that, you know, isn't really like a super product heavy post, but something that just is like catches their attention. You know what I mean? Like that's part of social media, is just understanding like, okay, what is my audience?
There's so much attention getters out there.
Oh
too,
yeah.
now,
I mean, that's
insane.
social media, right? Like
it's almost like fishing. Like, who's got the best bait?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So trying to find, you know, content that resonates with your audience, that can first catch their attention and then kind of bring them down into that funnel. Like, okay, now I have your attention. Let me show you what we do here, what we provide, you know what I mean? And being able to articulate that in a way that's not just like, hey, check out this product, link in bio, you know what I mean? Like that, it can be difficult, but it's also, that's part of the reasons why I like this job, is because it's challenging, and it makes you think about, well, what could we do? what could we do right now that would kind of fit this trend or have this audio or be this kind of intro or transition that's like popular with video, and tie that into this product, you know what I mean? And get people's attention, but then also draw them into that funnel and make them a follower and, you know, a converter, and hopefully get them to, you know, buy or, you know, sign up for whatever this company has for them, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
yeah, it can be tricky, but it's fun, you know, it's a fun challenge, because, you know, I'd be lying if I said I don't get a little bit of dopamine when like the content team like makes a super cool video that like fits a trend, and we like post it either on our account or we make it for a client, and then it just like takes off and it's viral, you know what I mean? Like I get some
Yeah,
dopamine
there's a
from
creative side to it. Like I've even still been involved with this creatively. Like, dude, I think this would make a great clip. Or even though I'm not doing the editing, I hire people that do it way better than I could. I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with my throat.
No, you're good.
I'm not sick, I swear. Excuse me. But yeah, I think, you know, just having that little bit of creative, it's good to have something creative, man.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things I love, podcasting and learning different perspectives, but also there is a creative side to this too. It's like, this is kind of how I want it to look.
Yeah.
These are the people that I want to have on these are the type of people I want to talk to. Like,
Yeah, knowing your audience is one of the biggest, most important parts of social media, I would say, is actually figuring out who your audience is, and then what are they after in your content? Do they want to be inspired? Do they want to be entertained? Do they want to be educated? You know, is it a little bit of both? Like, what are they actually after? And I'll even throw in like, do you want to make them mad? Because that's one thing people don't think. I mean,
it's pretty easy to do. So
it is, right? And I mean, you look at social media pages where, you know, again, this is the kind of social media that I don't really follow anymore. But like, you look at the pages that, you know, create political diversion or something, you know what I mean? Where like they post something about, you know, some left-wing liberal or some far-right conservative, you know what I mean? And then they just watch people like tear each other up in the comments, you know what I mean? Like, that's not the content that I want to subscribe to, but also it does well, right? Like, I mean, making people mad definitely can get some attraction on social media. You know, that's not something that we do at Clandestine for our clients, but it's interesting to see how viral like some videos that are like just completely negative.
Basically.
Yeah.
No, that's kind of wild. God, I'm drawing a blank. I was just thinking of something that I wanted to ask you.
No, you're good.
And I can't believe we'll come back to it.
Okay.
So I guess, I know what it was. Fake followers, fake accounts. Like that's one thing that I've really tried to stay genuine to here is like, we've had a ton of people reach out to us, a ton.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like we can grow your social media. Like we can get you thousands of followers. We can get you X, Y, Z, and you basically pay them a fund.
Yeah.
And then you get a bunch of followers, but there's no engagement. Like you don't know.
No.
It could be 1,000 people from India.
That's exactly.
That doesn't even speak English, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and that's essentially what you're getting. I mean, you're just paying for a number. And that's one thing that's a conversation we have with a lot of clients is, you know, obviously we want to see follower growth, right? Like follower growth is definitely a KPI or an indicator that your account is doing well, but it's not the be all end all, right? Because we've seen pages like that. Like you see a page that has 500,000 followers, but then I go look at their top or their recent 10 posts, right? And there's like 100 likes and 10 comments or something like that. You know what I mean? And there's like no shares, no saves, something like that. Or their reel only has 1,500 views. I'm like, well, that doesn't really look legitimate if you have, because there is a part of that where, you know, social media, you're only a certain percentage of your audience is going to see your content. But if your account has a healthy follower count and they're organic followers, there should be some level of engagement that correlates somewhat with their following, right? But again, like you see those pages that have hundreds of thousands of followers or even up in the millions, and there's only like, you know, maybe 10,000 views on their reel or something like that. And, you know, if there are, you know, every account is going to have a post that flops. You know, you're never going to, it's rare that you have an account where every single post is a banger, right? But if I'm consistently seeing posts that are not correlating with your follower count, then that is sometimes an indicator that someone may have bought followers, right? And again, it's just, followers are important because if you're doing the right thing, if you're posting content that's resonating with your audience and they want to share it, then you're going to see that engagement and you're going to see those impressions. But if it's just if you're just focused on one thing, if you're just focused on followers, it's really easy to get lost in the sauce and only try to build something to buy or to get followers, where like that's that would be a shortcut. Like, oh, well, we didn't hit 10,000 followers by this time, so let's just buy this other 3,000, or let's buy these followers, so then we can get that number. And I mean, I understand part of it because when you hit a certain amount of followers on some platforms, your account starts to get put in front of more people, right? Like that's something that the algorithm will recognize. But I mean, there's trade-offs, right? Because you're sacrificing your potential organic engagement for just a number. And that's where I would look at impressions and shares and your post reach more than just your followers, right? Like if I look at how a reel performed on one of our clients, and it's I can look at the reel and it'll say, this many accounts have been reached, and let's say half of them are non-following. Like, and if that video got like 10,000 views or reached 10,000 people and 5,200 of them are non-following accounts, like that's a win, right? Because that's 5,200 other people that have never seen that brand or aren't aware of it until now. So I mean, that's something that I would be looking at more than just a follower count, or like looking at the impressions. Like, hey, like this account that only has 2,500 followers got 158,000 impressions in the last 30 days on this platform, right? Like I can look at that and say, okay, this content is clearly resonating with people. They're sharing it. They're engaging with it. Like that's an indicator for me of one, like this is the content that we should keep pushing. Like this is what the audience likes. And then we can kind of tailor more posts around that based on how that post is performing, how that account is performing.
Makes a lot of sense. I guess really like looking at the back end of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What, so like one thing that we struggle with here, and so this is my own greed coming out, right? And me picking your expert brain now, but one thing that we struggle with here, I guess, is sometimes the guests that we have on or the content that we put out. Like, so recently I just had Sam Boyer-Goff on. Mm-hmm. Incredible dude's got a great YouTube channel, is doing some cool stuff. He's an active SWAT member here in the state of Colorado, works as a flight paramedic on a helicopter unit. And he came in and we did like a whole episode on like Stop the Bleed and like all this sort of stuff. And it really resonated. Like the podcast got a ton of downloads, right? Mm-hmm. But as soon as it hit Instagram, it just, it doesn't resonate. So part of me thinks is that's like shadow banning or something like that. So like, how do you guys, especially in the space that you're in, how do you navigate that with guns and firearms and military tactics? And
that's a good question. So one thing that I would recommend to you, and one thing that we do without, diving too deep, I would definitely, like, I see you do collaboration posts. Like that's huge. Collaboration posts are really big on Instagram right now. From what I've seen in the last 6 months or so, collaboration posts have been favored over a lot of other kinds of posts. Like, if I could say the two most like trending kinds of content are collaboration posts and reels, right? Like obviously reels are dominating social media, especially Instagram right now, but collaboration posts are a way that you can get your brand or your page in front of large audiences that may never have heard about you before. So, and that's one thing that we'll do with smaller accounts that are in the gun industry that may have difficulty being put in front of new audiences because their content's restricted only to people that follow them, is doing collaborative posts. So, and I mean, again, I saw that you were doing that with like Jeremiah and War Party Ranch. Like that 4-way collaborative post that's huge. Like, and I would do as many of those as I can.
Yeah, we try to only do it when the content is relevant, right? Because that checked all the boxes, and then like I think it's so cool what he's doing there too. So it's mainly me, cool. I guess. Part of me just doesn't fucking care.
Yeah.
Like how many followers I have or whatever. Yeah. It's kind of more of like, what do I want to portray?
Yeah.
What do I want? I want to leave a legacy, I guess, behind. Like, I don't want to just follow what's trending. And I guess we kind of did that at the very, very beginning of the podcast. And I steered back onto it real quick. It was like to the point where it's like, I don't care how many followers somebody has. It's more about the person sitting across from me and what I'm getting out of it. Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm hoping that resonates with the audience. Right. But it doesn't mean that we don't try to make, content that's, I want to make good content, but also at the same time, that is in the back of my mind, because that's why I've hired a YouTube editor to grow our YouTube so we can, be to a broader audience. And but I've given him some guidelines, like we need to stay within this, or I don't like that, like let's take that out. And we don't really edit anything out of the podcast, but just like having that in the forefront. Right. So, I think if it aligns, like that was the perfect post for that too. The most recent one. And
it was really
crushed,
good.
Yeah. It's good for Jeremiah. It's good for us.
Exactly.
It's good for everybody, right?
Yeah.
It's good for the people that he's helping or the women that they're helping. And
yeah. It's
so that's super how I kind of look at it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, back, only a short time ago, you could only do a collaboration with one other account, right? And now they've added it so you can do it with up to 4 people. So if I can take this company who makes a product that this guy with 20,000 followers likes, you know what I mean? And then I can hit up that company that also makes it or is a non-competitor and get them in that same piece of content and reach out to them and say, hey, can we get this collaboration with this guy and us? And they say yes. Then, if that account has 80,000 and this other collaborator's got 20,000, well, then that's now 100,000 people that your post is going to get put in front of, you know what I mean? So collaborative posts are huge right now. And again, being able to do it with 4 different accounts versus just 2 is a really great way to get your account in front of new followers. That's definitely something that I would pursue, as much as I can if I were you. And I mean, again, like it looks like, you're doing that already, right? Like, again, like you said, that
I think if it's relevant, like I still kind of run the social media page, I guess. I mean, I'm not making all the content that goes up there, but at the end, I'm choosing what content goes out, so kind of have the final say in what we do. And some of it I create myself too, I guess. Not so much anymore, but I guess as far as platforms go, man, because this is my one struggle, right? Like I want to have control over it. You have Instagram, X, former Twitter. You have the new Instagram, Threads. Threads.
Yeah, it's like Twitter
Threads
for
now.
Instagram. Yeah.
You have TikTok. I mean, there's all these different platforms. How important is it to be on all of those and spreading? Is it cookie cutter? Is there certain content you should put on one so it's like it's not the same thing, or like,
that's a good question.
Just repetitive, or like
what
do you guys do there?
You have to look at your audience, and you look at the different demographics of people who are on platforms, right? Like, I mean, TikTok is a good example because there's a lot of companies that make TikTok accounts, and I see why, because there are like gun pages that get really good engagement and numbers off of TikTok. Even Clandestine, like we have a TikTok, and I think one of our videos has like 1.2 million views, and that's super cool, right? Like, don't get me wrong, like that's still 1.2 million people who saw a video that Clandestine did. But you have to keep in mind, like, who is your target audience and which platform do they live on? Like for a gun manufacturer, you might get a lot of views on TikTok of like your newest gun or something like that. But how many people who are on TikTok are potential consumers of that product, right? Like you go look at the demographics of TikTok, like it's a lot of younger kids, right? So they might really like that.
They're
video.
Just going to the next video, right?
Type and the consumption rate the consumption rate on like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram is super quick. But again, like a lot of kids on TikTok are under the age of 18. So if they can't even buy a gun, or if if 60, 70% of the users on this platform are not even in my target consumer audience, does it really make the most sense for me to start an account on there and start posting on there? I think that's one thing that would be good to keep in mind. I mean, again, like you might get 1.2 million views, and it goes viral, but again, like how many of those people in that audience that interacted with your video can actually use your product or buy it, right? So the people you're trying to target is a big portion of what platform you should pick. one platform that I think is really big is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is huge. For one thing, there's not as many bots on LinkedIn. There are still bots on LinkedIn. Like I still see like messages from like some person in India or China who's like trying to sell tactical gear on LinkedIn. But
how much of that shit is out there? Because I know like that's a huge scare in the rigging world, right? Like when you're hanging stuff, like you don't want anything from China, dude.
Right.
You want like Chicago stamped USA steel. Like it's super important because people could literally die.
Yeah, it's the same in the gun world, right? Like there's all kinds of Chinese companies that make just like blatant knockoffs.
Well, even with tourniquets, I had no idea until we had Sammy. He's like, there's a ton of knockoff tourniquets that like, you can get a tournament for $20.
Yeah. But the windlass is going to break. Something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Crazy.
There's a ton of companies that do that. So, that's something to be aware of, but there's a lot of value on that platform. There's more real users on that account, and there's usually people are on there for different reasons than Instagram and Facebook. And going
it's
back
more
to
of
like
a business driven
platform,
and
people are on there there's people on there who are okay with reading like 1 to 2 to 3 paragraphs on LinkedIn. That's not something that we typically do on Facebook and Instagram, because like kind of what we're just talking about, like the consumption rate is so quick, right? Like people are just scrolling on Instagram, and unless something like really catches their attention, they might stop and watch it. But for example, like, if you look at a reel on Instagram and you start to see the caption and then there's something that says like read more, right? Like how many people actually click the read more button to like read 3 paragraphs or 2 paragraphs on Instagram? It's like, almost
like that
none.
First sentence is the only thing that you're really banking on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like on LinkedIn, you can definitely do longer formed content and people will read it, because most people who are on LinkedIn are people who are like sometimes at work and are on LinkedIn because they're allowed to be on LinkedIn during work hours. And they're like, well, I have all this time. I can sit here and read this 2-3 paragraph post that goes into the history of this or this informative post or something like that. So that's a really
I always thought LinkedIn was just like resumes though.
Sure. We trust me, I get all the time, like when we talk to people who have a service or a product that we think would do really well on LinkedIn, I approach them with that idea and they're like, well, isn't that just like you said, like, isn't that just for like networking and creating or, putting a resume on there? And I mean, there's definitely, LinkedIn is definitely the place to potentially seek employment, but it's also a great place to inform people about a service or about a product or the history behind something or anything like that. I mean, I have to be careful because there's things that we use LinkedIn for that I don't want to give away.
Sure.
That kind of something.
I'm not asking for
you're
any
fine.
secrets. I'll ask you off the mic, dude.
Yeah, for sure.
For those.
But LinkedIn is a super viable platform for sure. Definitely. And again, it boils down to like, who's my target audience? What's their general demographic, and which platform fits that demographic the most, right? And I mean, with the gun industry, it's tricky because obviously a lot of gun pages have their contents restricted on Instagram, right? But at the same time, that's where virtually all of their consumers are on, is Instagram. Like if you want to do, posts with influencers or something like that, or people who are, a big presence in the gun industry, they're on Instagram, and that's where a lot of your customers live. So that's kind of that's a difficult balance, is, trying to figure out how do we get content seen by people who don't follow us on a platform that is actively trying to restrict the content that we're putting out. So, I mean, it's a tricky battle, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, we're dealing with it here too. Just even shit that we talk about and then we think is like something that I think that will do really well. Like we just did 150 episodes, like 4 episodes ago, Derek, something like that, I think. And it'd be 4 episodes ago, because I think this is 154, but or maybe not. I'm drawing a fucking blank right now. This will be 153. 153, yeah. But we just had my buddy Mark in, and he kind of helped me start this. He's one of the most prominent coaches in the UFC. And we took this really cool clip that I thought was going to just like fucking crush, dude, because he was talking about like, this is something that he's done is at the highest level for a career for a super long time and is one of the most prominent coaches. And he was talking about walking to the octagon and smelling the smell of blood and Canvas and knowing that it was like go time. And I was
Yeah.
like, dude, this is going to fucking crush,
That's
dude.
sick.
And Instagram just shut it down. I don't know. Like, or maybe people just didn't resonate with it. I have no idea. Like, how do you know when you are actually being censored or shadow banned? Or
Usually, I mean, with most accounts, like you'll get that notification that says your account or your content is only restricted to people you follow, and it'll give you like, it'll say like these posts specifically violate the guidelines.
Yeah, and that's what we got during.
Yeah. That's like your biggest key indicator right there. If your account is somehow being restricted, is to just, if you see that, I mean, it sucks because if it's like your most viral post or something, you're like, well, I don't want to fucking take that down. Like that's my bread and butter. Like that's what did really well.
Right.
But that's a pretty big indicator that your content may be restricted in some form or fashion, is if you get that warning and it tells you like, hey, if you remove this post and this post, then your account can start being seen by other followers. But for you, it's also tricky because, I mean, podcasts are a big thing right now, right? Like the market is
so many.
The market is really saturated with podcasts. So, but I think you have a good thing going because, I mean, you're selective about your audience. Like you don't just bring anybody on here, and you bring them on because you like them.
We try to do quality over quantity, I guess, a little bit too. I think that that's super important. And honestly, like I feel like too many people, we don't script anything, dude. Like I didn't send you any sort of script, and we just kind of, the conversation goes wherever. Like, I think there's a natural element, or that's what I like anyways, right? Like, if I had a bunch of questions lined up, and teed them up for you to answer, it's like, then you're missing out on everything that you could have talked about.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that route is much better than having like pre-scripted questions. You know what I mean? It just, you want it to be just like your content. You want it to feel organic, and you want it to feel, like a real conversation, not something that's just like a Q&A session, you know what I mean? Which there might be a time and a place for that, depending on who's on here. But
we're so fortunate with the guests too that say yes, like yourself and Luke and, like a lot of the people that I've reached out to, and I've tried to keep it that way. And even some of the guys that I've said no to, like,
sure,
I think it's super important too. Like I've tried to keep it just that genuine people, right? Like lead by example people is who I want in here, I guess.
Yeah. Well, dude,
right?
I really appreciate the opportunity. When you reached out to me, I was like, shit. I mean, I don't know.
You've been on my list for a long time. Like I have a little hit list that nobody sees, but like, because I want to reach out when like the time is relevant or whatever. But it's just like, I have a bucket list of people that I want to have in here, And it's like, I don't care what you are, I guess, no, I care more about the person than I do about the following or anything like that, I guess is what I was getting at earlier. It's like, it doesn't fucking matter to me. So.
Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, I appreciate it. I was super humbled when you reached out and you're like, hey, you want to come on the podcast?
Hell yeah.
Like,
there's many more, dude. It's like, I want to build a little bit of a tribe or a little bit of a community here, and that's why I've kept it close knit with like some of the same circles that we all run in, you know what I mean? Like, and I think it's just super cool, and I want to showcase what people do, and more importantly, it's my own greed. I get to sit down. I learned so much about you tonight, and so it's like, I want to have the people that we have in here, I want to have back again, whether it's once a year, like we just, I'm kind of circling back through that because we've been bad. It's been a learning curve, man, even though we've been at it for over 4 years now, or coming up on 4 years, I guess, in April. It's, I'm constantly learning, right? Like I'm trying to figure out like, how do we put out more content? How do I get to do this more? You know, like how do I get to do more than one a week? That sort of thing. But, going back, like I didn't even realize 4 years had passed before I had Mercedes back. So it's not always a year, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like just having that, like being able to catch up, then you already have like this bond build. I don't know. You build a bond in here that you can't build anywhere else. I don't think too. It's kind of cool. So.
Yeah, no, it's super cool, man.
Yeah,
it is. And that's the same with social media. I mean, you have to be constantly learning, you know what I mean? The things that might have been working a year ago may be irrelevant now. So, I mean, just trying to stay on top of different trends and how to keep your client's content unique and stay in front of the audience is crucial. And I mean, it's the same thing with podcasts or YouTube videos. So I get it, man. It can be a tough gig for sure.
Yeah, I'm not complaining by any means, dude. This is what I enjoy, and I hire people to do all that other bullshit that I don't want to do.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
And then they get really mad when I shoot down their ideas sometimes, but
yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah.
What do you got coming up, man? I know you guys are super busy, but what's kind of on the horizon, and you guys got anything you want to plug? Or
let's see. So
we're coming up on 2 hours, so we're gonna wrap this up here pretty
quick.
soon. Yeah, it goes by really fast.
Yeah. So we have, our winter warfare combined shoot is coming up here really soon. So there should be some really sick content. That's going to be in Montana.
Nice.
Yeah. So that'll be really sick. We'll have our multicam Alpine covered snowmobile in there. And
we've got dope. Yeah.
We've got an M Razor now, which will probably be outfitted and be used in that shoot. That'll be a really good one. That's coming up here pretty shortly. And then we're doing another shoot down at that Dillon Aero compound, in a little over a month, I think.
Is that here in Colorado?
No, the Dillon Aero compound is outside of Phoenix. That's where the miniguns and stuff are. Yeah. Nice. So we're doing another shoot down there, which will be super cool. Those are two big ones coming up on the content side, and
sign me up. I'll work for free.
Yeah,
again.
Dude, I get so many DMs like that, when I'm doing clandestine stuff, and people are like, "Bro, I'll literally just come down there and pick up brass. If I can just be there, I want to say yes. I'm like, it's not, unfortunately it's not up to me, but it's just super cool having people do that. Just reaching and being hey, I want to be a part of this, and I'm like, dude, trust me, if there was a way to get you down there, I would love nothing more to have you. And that's another thing which is super cool about this job is just running into people that are like, oh, I saw this video, that was super cool, or you guys did this, and I don't take credit for it because I didn't make the content. That's all the content team and a lot of the ideas that they have cooking. But it's cool to be a part of something like that where you have people who are just really creative and are very talented at what they do and are able to just capture content and generate different videos and pictures that resonates with people, and that's super cool. That's one of my favorite parts about going to SHOT Show is just the people and interacting with people. Are I'm like, oh, I'm Christian with Clandestine. Oh, Clandestine, I love the stuff you guys did, and this was super cool. And I'm like, thank you very much. I super appreciate it. I always tell them I do the stuff behind the computer. The guys over there behind the cameras are the guys that really make the magic happen. So big shout out to the content team for crushing it like always.
That's awesome. Well, cool. We'll definitely, feel free to tag us on anything, or if you guys need any help resharing anything. It's crazy that I've known you guys for 4 or 5 years now. It's crazy how time goes by.
It goes by so fast,
especially this 2 hours. So we'll have to do this again, man.
I'd love to.
And thanks so much. Shout out to Clandestine Media, all the employees down there. Or up in Montana now, I guess, right, too. So
the social team is the only team that's really kind of remote. So me and another buddy who lives in Denver are here, and then my other buddy Ian, who's on the social team, is in Idaho, and then everybody else is in Montana.
Okay, super rad.
Yeah.
Is it at Clandestine Media Group? Is that the Instagram?
Yeah, Clandestine_media.
Okay, there you go. And then your personal page, if people want to follow that.
Sauce Boss Photo.
That's right.
It's just some of my own mediocre photography. Feel free to check it
No,
out
there's super. It's a great follow, man. There's some super cool shit on there. So
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, I have fun with it. It's definitely hard.
I need you to set up my new Glock.
Yeah.
Because I was admiring yours today. I was like, damn. Badass.
I'll definitely have to say a huge shout out if you want to get your Glock modded. The best person is Landers Weapon Systems. The dude over there, Garrett, is an absolute wizard. Does phenomenal work. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of different Glocks, and the one that I have that has framework done by him and slide work has been absolutely amazing. So I would definitely recommend him. But yeah, man, I'm happy to. That's one of my favorite things to do is to just talk different guns. That's a lot of my guys hit me up and hey, I want to buy this gun for this reason, or I want to do this. What optics should I get, or I love having those conversations. So yeah, hit me up anytime, dude, for sure.
Awesome. We'll follow Sauce Boss, and then is it clandestinemediagroup.com or
that's the website.
We'll put live links into this too. Just go to their website, check out some of the amazing, cool, badass shit that they're doing there, and the portfolio is amazing. and know a bunch of the photographers personally and the models. So quite a few of them have been on the podcast here. So you guys are kind of family. So.
Oh, we love it, man.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
Hell yeah, dude. It's an honor to have you. I'm glad I finally got you in here. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mountainside Podcast. If you haven't had a chance to do this already, please take a moment, follow, like, subscribe, or rate on whatever platform you catch the Mountainside Podcast at. If you'd like some more information on upcoming episodes, safety tips, access to all of our affiliates, and all the badass discounts that we get here at the Mountainside Podcast, check out themountainsidepodcast.com.